Welcome to our presentation. I am Mark, and I am joined by Bavraj, Brendan, Hamza, Jacob, Malind, and Zebo. We will be talking about the auto industry and why there is a huge shift to electric vehicles.
Gas-powered engines were invented in 1861 by Nicholas August Otto. The invention helped start the Industrial Revolution, but with the gas-powered engines, they all used unrenewable resources such as fossil fuels. But with the constant progress of humankind to make things more efficient, the gas-powered engine is viewed as obsolete, and engineers have discovered newer and more efficient ways to generate energy. This eventually resulted in the creation of an electric motor. At their first incarnation, they weren't nearly as powerful as the gas powered engines that we see in our motorized vehicles. However, that changed over time due to innovation. Electric motors have been appearing more often in motor vehicles and other engines, such as electric generators and scooters that can be seen around the city. With recent forecasts and pollution levels and rising gas prices, the industry is becoming obsolete due to a lack of resources and not being renewable. Companies are seeking alternatives to their motors. This global interest in reducing carbon emissions and our footprint has led to global protests, new bills, and taxes to be introduced to combat the growing concern for our pollution. Companies have been taking it upon themselves to develop more efficient motors with alternative fuel sources. The growth in the electric motor industry has contributed to the reduction of pollution, and more people are turning to these motors and vehicles since they are cheaper in the long run and have less spending on gas. The changes that were adopted by the industry were that each company was being held for corporate responsibility where they needed to become more efficient while creating an eco friendly alternative to gas powered engines. A driving force for this change was the number of consumers and investors wanting to remove their carbon footprint by making a zero emissions option. People in recent years have been more aware and conscious of their choices, whether that is an alternative to meat or simply using paper straws instead of plastic straws. Change to the electric motor can't be triangulated to a single factor. There have been multiple factors that created the change for the industry, but to experts, there has been an estimated increase in the industry, and by 2032, have a market size that surpasses 249 billion USD. Electric motors have become more efficient with innovation and are nearly as efficient as gas powered engines as well. There has been a growing increase in electric charging stations all throughout Canada, with there being nearly 1,600 public available charging stations and 6,000 private charging sites.
Now let's talk about pressures. The transition from diesel and petrol vehicles to electric vehicles is a significant trend in the automotive industry. A combination of internal and external pressures, such as customer demands, technological advancements, corporate strategies, government regulations, and environmental concern, is driving this transition. Car manufacturers are increasingly investing in electric vehicles as countries around the world implement stricter emission standards and consumers become more aware of environmental impact of traditional cars. In this context, it is critical to comprehend the various internal and external pressures driving the transition to electric vehicles. Let's dig further. Now let's talk about internal pressures. Consumer demand. As consumer becomes more aware of the environmental impact of traditional petrol and diesel vehicles, there is a growing demand of electric vehicles. According to a Deloitte survey 2022, 50% of respondents in the United States of America and 61% in China are willing to consider purchasing an electric vehicle for their next car, which is a good and a huge number. Now let's talk about technological advances. The advancement of advanced battery technology has been a driving force in the transition to the electric vehicles. Over time, lithium-ion batteries, which are commonly used in electric vehicles, have become more affordable and efficient. Now let's talk the last internal pressure, that is corporate strategies. As part of their long-term corporate strategies, many car manufacturers are investing heavily in electric vehicles. For example, Volkswagen has pledged to invest around 35 billion pounds by 2025 in electric vehicles and digitalization to become a carbon neutral company by 2050, which is a great number and a huge number. Now, let's dig further and move to external pressures. So, one of the major external pressures that the automotive industry are facing right now is the government regulations. Government regulations are a major external force driving the transition to electric vehicles. Many countries have set targets for the phase out of petrol and diesel vehicle sales in the coming years. For example, Norway tends to phase out sales of petrol and diesel vehicle by 2025, which is very near, and it's a very um, if I say it's a very motivated step to do. Now let's talk about another external pressure, which is environmental concerns. Concerns about the environmental impact of traditional petrol and diesel vehicles are also driving the shift towards electric vehicles. Transportation, according to an International Energy Agency, accounts for roughly 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emission, which is a concerning thing. Now, let's talk about the last but not the least external pressure, which is economic incentives. Governments all around the globe and other organizations are also offering financial incentives to encourage the use of electric vehicles. Electric car owners, for example, can benefit from tax breaks, reduced road tolls, and free parking in some countries.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Jacob here, and I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about the methods for managing resistance to change in the automotive industry. More specifically, I'm going to be talking to you guys about some of the things that we've been looking at in regards to introducing electric cars into this industry that has predominantly been, managed and run by gas and diesel alternatives. So historically, whenever car companies have come out with an electronic option or an electric option for a car, it is typically a side sort of gig. It's something that is marketed as a futuristic option, and it's not really catered to the bulk of buyers. So with this, people kind of form doubts if they are, used to driving a gas vehicle and they're maybe a little bit iffy on the future of an electric car and they need to be convinced. The current ad campaigns are not really reaching out to that audience at all. As we know, things are becoming more dire and we are looking for ways to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions. And so the electronic car industry is the opportunity is growing, is what I'm trying to get at. And essentially, if we are going to be able to make that change successful, we're going to have to be able to successfully manage the resistance to that change. And so moving from a model where we're just educating people on features of the car, we're going to have to be able to move to a model where we facilitate and support a transition to this new reality, essentially. So that's going to look like communicating and proving that these new options are going to be not just as reliable, but maybe even more reliable than the current alternatives, and showing people that, hey, it will be a cost-effective option because you aren't going to have to pay for gas, but not just telling people and giving them a feature list and having it as a secondary option, but really showing them and proving to the people that it is reliable and it is something that we are going to see benefit from moving towards a model that we sell more electric cars and maybe push for a more electric car future than what we're currently looking at with this gas and diesel dominated industry. But yeah, essentially the most successful method for managing this resistance to change is going to be the facilitation and support model. Right now, we're just kind of info dumping on people, and if we want to see success in these changes, we are definitely going to have to move to a model that pushes people to try something new and support them through that change. So yeah, that is all for this slide.
That concludes our views on how electric vehicles are changing the auto industry and how we can manage this change. Thanks for listening.